This is the Radiola 60 combined with the RCA 100A loudspeaker. The cabinet for this radio is not original. This project actually started about 6 months ago, back in January, when I acquired a Radiola 60 chassis and a Radiola 18 chassis and power supply, and also a mystery power supply that I'm not quite sure what it was for. I then spent a good bit of time over the past 6 months wiring different parts of this assembly together to make it work electronically, and also building the cabinet you see here in front of you. This project is basically complete except for the knobs. The knobs I have on there now are not going to stay there, but I'm currently waiting for appropriate knobs to appear on eBay at an acceptable price. So I'll give you a little bit of history on the Radiola 60. It was introduced in 1928. It's an RCA superheterodyne. At the time, RCA had a monopoly on superheterodynes since they were the owners of the patent. I believe that patent expired in 1930, at which point anyone could make superheterodynes. But in the 20s, RCA had a monopoly, and they charged very high prices. I believe the Radiola 60 cost over $200 in 1928. It uses only triodes. There were no tetras on the market yet, so it has, I believe, 8 or 9 tubes. I believe it's 8 tubes in the receiver, plus a 9th tube, the rectifier, and the power supply. The original design used only paper capacitors. There were no electrolytic capacitors at that time, so the filtering circuitry makes extensive use of large chokes combined with small value paper capacitors to do the power supply filtering. One thing that I just wanted to mention, in my collection I value the electronic evolution of things over time rather than the actual originality. So for me, I think it's more interesting to have the Radiola 60 circuitry active rather than having the exact original cabinet. Taking that in mind though, if I did come across an original Radiola 60, I wouldn't modify it in any way. If I had something that's already original, I would keep it original. But since I came across the chassis parts for a total of, I believe, $25, I figured this would be a better way to go to have the original circuitry rather than spending, over $200 or more on an original Radiola 60 with the cabinet and everything. So I will give you a little demonstration of this, and then I will show you what's inside the cabinet. Let's give the tubes a minute to warm up. The wire on the left side is the antenna. That going up to my antenna on the ceiling. I'll turn off the lights to cut out interference. Since I have the antenna on the ceiling, a lot of the Since I have my antenna on the ceiling, the lights sometimes cause interference. As you can see, it does work, and it sounds pretty decent. One thing that can happen with these radios, since they use tetrodes, you have to have neutralizing capacitors. Parasitic capacitance can occur between the grid and the plate in triodes and cause whining and hissing sounds. So to cancel that out, you have to have neutralizing capacitors, which you then have to fine-tune to properly cancel out the different values in the capacitance. And if those capacitors get out of tune, then you have all kinds of whining and hissing. Not like this is static. Stop that. If the neutralizing capacitors get out of tune, you get all kinds of whining and hissing in the audio sound, and you can hardly hear anything the radio is tuned to. Luckily, I did not have to touch these at all. When I got this radio, it sounded basically like this. So luckily I have not had to adjust any of those. From what I understand, this is not a very enjoyable procedure. You have to remove the tuning capacitor and do a lot of work with the tuning capacitor out, and you have to adjust them individually for each tube. But as you can see, this is in working order, and it sounds pretty good. So I'll now give you a little view of what's inside the cabinet. So this is our view inside the cabinet. As you can see, along the front here, we have the Radiola 60 receiver chassis. Back here we have the Radiola 18 power supply chassis. I have a little bit of modification to use that with this. And this last piece in the back is the mystery power supply that I got with this unit. That I'm using to derive the high voltage supply for the receiver. The Radiola 18 operates on a lower voltage than the 60, so I need to get the high voltage from that piece back there, which I then feed over to this power supply here, where the resistors and filtering capacitors and everything are, and then goes over to the receiver over here. This receiver actually needs a variety of different voltages. It needs two different tube voltages. It needs 2.5 volts for all of the type 27 tubes, which are indirectly heated cathode triodes. It needs 2.5 volts for those, which are in here, and this one on the end here is a type 71A, and that is a power output triode, and that needs 5 volts. So it needs two different AC tube voltages, and then it also needs several different high voltages to drive the receiving circuitry. So those are derived underneath this unit here. There's a series of dropper resistors and filtering capacitors, and also chokes, which drive the different high voltages it needs. The highest, I believe, is over 200 volts. And then from there, several different lower voltages. So this power supply here derives the... Actually, under this box there are two transformers. One is the high voltage transformer, which puts out, I think, around 300 volts or so, which is then rectified by the rectifier tube over there, type 80. Also, the 5 volts for that filament is derived by the larger of the transformers under that box there. After it is rectified, it's then sent over here, like I said, for biasing, dropper resistors and everything, filtering. There's also a secondary transformer under that cover, which is a new one I had to buy, and that derives the 2.5 volts, I believe 2.25 volts, for the type 27 tube filaments. And the Radiola 80 used only one, the Radiola 18 used only one type 27 tube, and so the transformer in that power supply is only ready to drive one of them, where, as you can see, there are, 7 here? So those 7 tubes draw, approximately 10 amps or so. So I needed a much larger transformer to drive those tubes than the one that was included in the Radiola 18 power supply. The Radiola 18 power supply is still used, though, for the 5 volts for the 71A output tube. And also the secondary can here. This can houses the chokes, I believe, and this can houses the power supply, the transformer, power transformer. And the smaller can in the back there, that originally housed the paper filter capacitors and still houses the output choke, which is used to bias the output tube here. This little box down here on the receiver chassis is a audio coupling transformer. So this is our output tube here. I believe this is our detector tube, the oscillator, 2 IFs, the mixer, and 2 RF stages. And this is our bathtub capacitor for tuning. So I believe that's about it for this little overview here. I just wanted to give you a little overview of this project, which is basically completed except for the appropriate knobs. So I hope you enjoyed this video.